and welcome back to my channel. So every now and then I see something on the internet that really irritates me, and I always have to take a moment to pause and think, is this something that requires a response either in this person's comment section or a response from me separately? And most of the times I just ignore it because it really doesn't require a response, because a lot of times things that are posted on social media are not posted for true engagement or dialogue. They're posted simply to bother and upset people. But one thing that is really starting to bug me is the narrative that keeps being created about this character and her story. So if you're not familiar, especially if you're not a millennial, which I'm starting to wonder with some of these commentaries how old these girls are, but I digress. So if you're familiar with the American Girl dolls, I know in recent times, because there are American Doll stores in different cities, people may not remember that originally the Pleasant Company that produced these dolls and the books was like a strictly mail order type of thing. Like, you could only get the dolls and their accessories through catalogs, which I was obsessed with when I was in elementary school. My aunt actually got me a subscription, and for like years I just collected them. But anyway, originally there were no like modern American Girl dolls that you could just get for the sake of having the doll. There were only historical characters, and with those characters there were a series of books about their lives, and there were 6 books that would explore the life of the characters. Usually the characters that would start out the series, they would be like 10 years old, and like I said, different historical periods. So this is Addie Walker. She debuted in 1993. I was in 2nd grade. It was a big deal. And her backstory is, the initial story is set in 1864, towards the end of the Civil War, and she is enslaved on a plantation in North Carolina with her family. Now, throughout the course of the series, you see her and her family escape to freedom. And it is a really well done, in my opinion, accurate historically accurate depiction of what life was like for Black Americans during slavery, after the Civil War, and the experiences of plantation life through the lens of a child, and then her experiences in the North once her and her family have escaped. So the beginning of the series, when they're on the plantation, it starts off where her family is planning to escape, but before they can all escape together, her brother and her father get sold off. So then her and her mother decide, they make the choice to do it by themselves. They have to leave her baby sister behind because they're worried that she may cry out while they're trying to escape. So by the end of the book, her and her mother have made it. They have been on a stop on the Underground Railroad, and they've made it to Philadelphia. So that's how the first story ends. The second one explores, because each in the series, like each book has like a theme. So the second one is usually about whatever character's journey in school. So in the second one, it's just her journey of education, this thing she was denied as a slave. So she's learning how to read, she's learning how to write. And it actually has a really interesting storyline about her being formerly enslaved and coming into contact with free people of color, because there's a girl in her class whose family has never been enslaved, and kind of like that class issue, and also there's a little bit of colorism in there. So it's a really interesting story, but that's what the second story really covers, is her understanding, the value of education and all of that type of stuff. It's really good. And her teaching her mother what she's learning in school. So her mother is now learning how to read and write as well. And then the third book is always a Christmas themed book. And in that book, they're reunited with her father. He's made it to Philadelphia. He finds them and they're all united. In the fourth book, they initially, because her parents both had different skill sets that they had when they were on the plantation that they brought with them to the North. So her mother was the seamstress, so she finds work as a seamstress in the North. And so initially it's Addie and her mother that stay in a room above the dress shop that her mother works in. But then by the fourth book, her father has found work as a carpenter and her mom is a seamstress. And they move into a boarding house. And in the fourth book, which is usually a birthday book, you get the backstory of how most slaves did not know their birth dates. And so An older woman in the boarding house encourages her to choose her birth date, and in that book, the Civil War ends. So she chooses that date as her birthday and has a celebration. What's really interesting about that book is it does explore the racism that Black people experienced in the North, even though that was supposed to be like an escape for them. Racism is a part of America. So it's very interesting. And then in the fifth book, which is usually like a summertime book, so the Civil War has ended. So her church and another girl that was in the second book when she was in school, that church, basically the Black churches in the community, they get together, they're going to have like a fair, right? And the whole entire time, this other girl in school has been talking about her uncle who has served in the Union Army in the Civil War. Now, Addie hasn't seen or heard anything about her brother since they ran away. And so he always wanted to join the Union Army. So she always brings up the fact that, there's a possibility that her brother has fought in the war. So her and this girl get into this fight over whether her brother actually was in the war, and the other girl actually knowing that her uncle fought in the war, little kid fight about like having a sense of pride over who did what. They have a big fight. Well, at the height of during the fair, the other girl finds out that her father died in the war. Not her father, her uncle. That her uncle died in the war. And it creates this sense of empathy in Addie, and she starts to find a common ground with the girl, and they kind of reconcile. But at the end of the book, they're doing a play with spool puppets. And she tells a riddle, and it's a riddle that her brother had told her in the first book. And so this Union soldier in the audience says, "Oh, that's easy. Even my little sister knows it." And she recognizes that that's her brother. And he did, run away. He fought in the Union Army, and he actually lost an arm. So it's this tangible sign or, symbol to her of the loss of war, that even though she's been reunited with her brother, he's lost an arm in his fight for freedom. And then the sixth book is usually set during the winter. And the sixth book, I think, really wraps up the story very well, because you're starting to see the full benefits through her of their freedom, because she's the one that can read and write. So she's the one that's been sending inquiries as to the rest of their family members, because there was an older woman and an older man that they called their aunt and uncle that looked after them on the plantation, and they were the ones that were looking after her baby sister. So they've been sending out all these letters trying to find them. And you're starting to see, because she's about to be 11, so she's about to age out of the primary school that she's at, and there's this institute that her teacher went to that trains Black kids to be educators. So the teacher's like, you can definitely get in and go there. So you're starting to see her evolve into having all the benefits of their life in Philadelphia. She's educated, she has a future ahead of her, and unfortunately, her friend, who was also a girl that was enslaved in Virginia, she can't go to school any longer because she has to help her mom out. Her mom is a laundress, and it's a really stark reality for her, Addie, because her parents are employed and she's able to go to school freely, but her friend Sarah now has to be, help take care of her family. But she decides that she's going to still help Sarah learn by sharing her lessons in school with her anyway, which I thought was really sweet. But it culminates with the aunt from the plantation finally making it north with the baby sister. And she tells her that even though the uncle wasn't able to make it, he knew that the Union troops were coming to their plantation. So when he passed away happy anyway, because he knew it was over and they were going to be free. And she eventually passes away. And so Addie is in a state of depression, because her dream of freedom was always a dream that included all of them. But she's still happy that the family unit they had, her and her siblings and her parents, are free. And you're starting to see the little sister because the little sister really doesn't know them because she was one. Her start to understand, this is her family and all the sacrifices they made to be reunited. So, and that's how the series ends. And in all of the historical books, they always had a look into the past in the back of the novel. So, like I said, a really, especially because the target age of these books was elementary school, preteen girls, pretty comprehensive look at that part of American history that I thought was dealt with in a very respectful manner. And then, of course, with the American dolls, the doll itself is part of it. So I got my doll when I was in 4th grade. And I loved Addie. And, I'm an older millennial, slightly older millennial, 86. And I just don't understand this recent desire to like reduce her to the slave doll with the tragic backstory. Like, we know that slavery is the tragedy of this country, but I feel like there's too much internalizing that as like the shame of Black Americans, where it's not our shame, it's our history, it's our legacy. Like, if you've seen another video that I posted about like my great-great-grandmother, who I found out was born in 1865, that's like my Addie Walker. That's my link. Like, I don't understand this weird shame that I see a lot of Black women trying to attach to this character because her story was the story of slavery, as if that's not an American story. And I feel like the more you try and run away from that because you don't like it, the more you take on a shame that doesn't belong to you. It's a horrific part of our history, but the shame does not belong to us. Okay? It just doesn't. And I really wish that we wouldn't do that, that we would accept the reality of it, learn about it. And of course we're angry. Of course it's like you're filled with horror and disgust when you think about the things that your ancestors had to endure. But to reduce their stories when they're told, whether they're fictional or real, to, oh God, I hated that the first Black doll they made was a slave doll. It makes me wonder if you read the books. It makes me wonder what you really felt or thought about being introduced to her character. And I just don't like it. And, I saw a TikTok. Yeah, I don't like it. I don't like it when Black creators do it. I don't like it when non-Black creators do it, because I feel like people are trying to make a point of, when they say that, like they're acknowledging how horrible slavery is. And it's like, you're not acknowledging how horrible slavery is. You're trying to put the shame and the stigma of slavery on this fictional character who's also a child. It's very weird, and I don't like it. So if you're one of those people that has this weird feeling about her character, Addie's character, being a slave, I would invite you to go reread those books and maybe think about why it embarrasses you or makes you feel so uncomfortable. Because it bothers me that that's like what people are doing now, because for years I've just like always enjoyed her story as what it was. And then eventually, American Girl just moved away. They archived like almost all of their historical characters to the point where I'm not even sure generations after even knew that there were books, because the books were all in our library. Like, because the Addie series wasn't the only one I read. I read a whole bunch of the other ones too. So it's like, I don't know. But I keep seeing all these videos, a lot of them by Black creators, and it just bothered me. So I just wanted to post a video about why I loved Addie when I was younger and her stories, because I almost feel like the stories are more important than the doll. And I feel like people are kind of conflating the two and not really, I don't know, not really dealing with it. It's weird. It's weird to me, and I don't like it. So this was a defense of Addie Walker. I love her. I will always love her. And I'm going to need more people to respect and love her as well. That's all.